Hello friends and welcome. I'm Sarah Liz and I have two cards for you today using Call Me Crafty Al's April 2024 Sheetload of Cards. I'm calling it the Sheetload Strugglebus. Let's just say my two boys, they're both in grade school, are on spring break. And so this video almost didn't happen, you'll see. But let's get started. So this is the Berry Sweet paper pad from scrapbook.com. And I wanted to point out that black and white pattern paper. You could use pattern paper on the second card instead of what we're gonna do. It would be less work. But for this first card, for the front, we're really just following the sheet load, right? So I have my A2 solid colored cardstock and then my 4x5¼ inch piece of pattern paper. I have followed the sketch, which I will link to below. She has a video where it releases and then she tells you how to get the free download. It's completely free. And we take this little piece and we cut it diagonally. And I apologize, my camera's gonna shift here, but it doesn't happen anywhere else in the video. So apologies for that. You could use any nesting shapes for this, right? You want them a little bit smaller so that when you stretch them out, they will fit on the card. But in the next card, we're going to play around with a different shape and some other ways to create that diagonal piece. I cut the grass using a pixie dust die, and I tell you what, I needed it to be 2 3/4 inches. But instead of just putting the grass into my trimmer, I cut a piece of white cardstock to be that size. And then I used my scissors to cut the grass to the same length. You guys, I seriously don't know where my brain was. And if I'm honest, I actually filmed this card second. I started with the harder card. And so by this time I was sort of done. But I had been dreaming of using this springtime gnome from Trinity Stamps to create an emergency card. He is so stinking cute and he actually comes together really quickly. There aren't very many pieces. You have to get a little creative to fit an emergency sentiment on there, but we're gonna make it work. There are 2 pieces for the beard, and the piece in the back really should be cut out of some like skin colored cardstock, but I don't have any. So I'm just using one of my alcohol markers and I will color in the top. Almost forgot, but we fixed it. We saved it. We saved a lot of things on these 2 cards. And then I will put the front piece of the beard right over the top of that. So it doesn't need to be neat and tidy with the scribbling back there. I have made other videos with this gnome. I love to add just a little bit of gray marker, like flick from the top and from the bottom to give it more texture and dimension. But I knew by this point in the day, like there was no way that was gonna go well. I might be able to get it done, but I probably would have lost my mind in the process. So I was like, you know what? He doesn't always need to have gray flicks in his beard, and he doesn't. So I added his nose and then his 2 little shoes, and then there are gloves, but we'll wait on those. I'm gonna use the mirrored arch labels for my sentiment. So I have cut out 2 small ones and then the slightly larger one. Here's a 2-inch circle over that gnome. That's what we normally use for a mat and is too big. And even that larger nested die is a little too big. The smaller one fits, but it needs something to help it pop out because his beard is so white. So I cut one of the same size out of some teal cardstock, and then I cut it in half. So I am just putting a little mint tape back there, and then I'm going to put this all the way up against sort of the ledge of my craft tray here. I have a strip of white cardstock that's about 1/4 inch, and then I'll put the other half of that. That just helps me to get it straight. You could eyeball that, right? You could just put glue on one and sort of wiggle it behind there and then glue on the other side. But this is where I was at. And so when I am struggling, I always look for ways to like make it a little more foolproof. When I created the one piece for the back, it was much easier to add wet glue and get it centered and make sure I had the same amount of blue showing on either side. But I decided that wasn't enough to make it stand out. Like I do want just a little bit of that on the top and bottom as well. It's significantly less than if I had just layered this on the next larger size of this shape. Okay, so it works fine. In my head, like I woke up one morning thinking about this gnome holding an emergency sentiment. And in my head, it was gonna fit a lot better. I think this works okay, but I am still looking for a way to make it work even better. When I come up with one, there will be a video. There really will be. So here it is. And there is some sort of texture in the layers of blue behind that because we have 4 different pieces of blue cardstock behind it, but I'm okay with it. Like, I actually kind of like that texture. I just used glue to add that gnome over the center. I think Crafty Owl's sketch has like a big oval right there. And then I glued the entire mat for the emergency sentiment onto the gnome. This is the birthday kit that came out in January. It's got tons of happy birthday sentiments. I'll link it at the end and in the description box below, as always. And I will just use my removable adhesive to add that right over top of the white layer that we had on there. It just makes it really easy to kind of know where that goes. And now it's still easy to switch out. When I go to add his gloves here, or his hands, I'm making sure there isn't any glue over top of the actual sentiment. They get really close, but they are not over top of it. So if I wanted to switch that out later, I could. And now we're gonna get fancy. I'm gonna stamp the inside of my card, you guys. This is the Stampendous Birthday Messages stamp set, and it has a bunch of really cute, kind of funny inside sentiments. I'm using, well, once you're over the hill, you do have a great view. But there's also, instead of being late to wish you a happy birthday, could you call it early for next year? And then some sweet ones, sending warmest wishes for your happiness today and always. Hoping your birthday is filled with lots of family, friends, food, and fun, and a couple others. Like, it's really, really versatile, great for insides. I always forget to do the insides. So I kind of flipped my Misty while I got the sentiment set up. I just find it easier to make sure it's straight that way. And then I'm gonna take that out and we're gonna add a pop-up gift card holder. This die set comes with a bunch of sentiments, some layering dies, an envelope builder. It's huge. So it's 5 inches by 4.5 inches, this cardstock, and I scored it in the middle and folded it in half. If I had this to do over, I would do it differently. I would fold it in half and then I would flatten it back out and run this through my die cut machine with it flat. Okay, so here it is. I didn't have it quite up to the crease. There is no cut line on that top piece that's right up against the crease, right? So it won't cut through that anyway. But when I unfolded it on that left side that was on the bottom when I ran it through my machine, it just doesn't look as good. So I'm gonna tape the die to that and run it back through, and I'm gonna let the nice pretty side hang out the edge so it doesn't get mucked up. But in the future, I would just put the die right up against the crease and run it once, and then put it up against the crease on the other side and run it again. I think that would work better. Then it has these sort of cut lines, like a dashed line on either side that you need to fold. So I have the pretty side facing me and I'm folding them up towards the center. All right. Then I will fold the whole thing in half, and that's how I'm going to install this in my card. I have a video where I've made a gift card holder like this without a die set, and I will link to that below and at the end of this video as well if you're interested. But since this die came in the set, I thought I'd try it out. I'm going to add glue to just one side at a time, and I'm really pushing that all the way into the crease when I do this. I maybe made a mistake using 100-pound cardstock for this. It works, but 65-pound cardstock will actually fold in there better, and you won't have so much bulk, and it will hold the gift card just fine. It sort of pops in the middle, and so then it pops up when you open it. I love that. If I'm gonna stamp the inside or add a pop-up mechanism or anything like that, I always do the card base separate from the card panel. And once they're both done, and I know I haven't like oopsed somewhere, then I glue them together. So that was the strategy I was going with. This is like the very last thing I'm doing on these 2 cards. And it turned out okay, right? I'm pretty happy with it in the end. I would love to know if you've made a gift card holder like this before, because I think they're a lot of fun. This next one is a see-through card, and I'm gonna start by Betterpressing. This is a new plate called Buffalo Plaid, and I'm just taping a half a sheet of cardstock in there. It is not Betterpress paper, it's just cardstock. Then I'm gonna ink this up with my Concord and 9th black ink. I just find this is a little faster, and it actually, I was worried that it was kind of messy. There's ink all over that plate in places that I don't want to transfer to the paper. It did not matter. You guys, this turns out beautifully. If you're not interested in this plate, cool. That pattern paper I was showing you in the first card, that pack has like a black and white check pattern that would work equally well for this. I'm going to slow this down because we're going to work on that clear insert piece. Here's my top folding card base, right? 11 by 4.25. And I folded it in half at 5.5. And I'm going to put that crease right on my 4 1/4 inch line. So my top panel is 4 1/4 square. All right. I'm using the Happy Birthday from that same die set, right, that had the gift card pop up in it. And those dies barely fit. If your dies aren't as long, you don't have to be as weird about this. But I'm going to tape the dies to my paper when they fit. If it's a little tight, I just make the angle a little bit steeper. Okay, I'm not cutting through the dies. I just need it for the angle. Then I'm going to slide this into my trimmer. I'm making sure the dies are underneath that finger guard and that they're not going to hit the blade. And then I want to cut this so that my angle matches the angle of those word dies. Okay, again, if you were using a shorter sentiment, that would be easier. They aren't exactly equal. That's okay. Don't worry about it. Then I edited out the first time I mucked this up. So I started by gluing my pink paper to that top piece, and that was a mistake. I'm using removable adhesive this time. So then I can take it to my trimmer and I'm just gonna line up the white cardstock with my blade, and I'm gonna cut that. And now I have matching pieces of pink for both the top and the bottom of my card. Then I wanna add my buffalo plaid to the pink pieces. So I am eyeballing that sort of 1/8 of an inch that's gonna be on those 3 sides, and I'm making sure my glue doesn't go there. But that wet glue lets me wiggle this so that the 3 sides have equal margins. Then I'm going to take this to my trimmer and I will cut it just like we did before. You could cut the plaid down to 4 by 4 and then do this, but I sometimes think it looks weird when you have a gap of space and then the pattern picks up right where it left off before. So I'm going to do it this way. I am going to line this up on the bottom, just like we did the top. And I will end up with this strip that gets cut out of the middle. I'm going to save that. I will put that on a different card later. I can mat it on some pink or some black cardstock. It'll be a really, really great accent. Okay, I'm not getting rid of it. I've glued it on there. I'll flip it over and I'm going to trim off, just like before, that extra piece of white buffalo plaid cardstock. Okay, so there's the top and bottom of my card. These are the notched corner frames. This is a nesting set from Spellbinders that I think is just beautiful. I'm going to glue these together first. Okay, I want a little more contrast because sometimes this one's a little tricky. Not every edge has the exact same margin. Where the notches are, that gets slightly bigger than the rest of it. So I like wet glue. I like high contrast. That helps me. Then I'm going to put my 2 pieces together and butt them right up against each other. And I'm going to line up this nested set of dies right in the middle of the 2, as if that were my card front. And I'm going to tape it only to the top piece, just to the top. And then I'll bring that to my trimmer. And I'm going to do just like I did before. Technically, I could have glued it to the top piece, but I wasn't feeling confident enough to do that yet. I'm using a piece of 100-pound black cardstock and 65-pound white shimmer cardstock. If it was 2 pieces of 100-pound cardstock, I would have struggled to get that through my trimmer. And then I edited out like an hour's worth of like throwing this card in the trash and really, really struggling. You can see on the top, I actually peeled off a second piece. I had to peel apart the bottom. Here are the backs, right? Some of these corners are getting pretty thin because I've had to pull cardstock apart. There's glue all over that one. Seriously, you guys, I threw the whole thing in the trash and I can't remember the last time I did that. And I was about to start over and I was like, I don't have it in me. I don't have it in me. How am I going to salvage this card? I don't have another way. And so I made it work and I was like, I'll just share it with you guys and I'll show you what I learned. Here's what I learned. Make sure that you've lined up the bottom patterned piece with the bottom white piece, right? That's what I did wrong the first time. I glued the bottom to the top. I used some mint tape to hold that top flap shut and then mint tape again on the bottom so that it is lined up right with the bottom and sides of the card. I added double-sided tape in 4 places, right? So it's on all of those diagonal pieces. And then I have some heavyweight acetate that I'm going to add straight onto the card, covering that entire open section. I will link to what I use below. It's actually shrink plastic, like shrinky dink film. It's super heavyweight, and as long as you're not taking any heat to it, it's good to go, right? I really, really love it. It's crystal clear. But you could use any heavyweight acetate here. Then I'm double checking my pieces, top on the top, bottom on the bottom. I know I wrote it on there, but at this point I trust nothing. I have removed the release paper from that top pink piece, and I'm going to add glue just at the top part, and I'm going to try to line up that top corner first, since the glue will let me wiggle, but once that double-sided tape hits the acetate, it sticks hard. I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom, okay? Glue everywhere that doesn't have double-sided tape. You could do the whole thing with glue, but you just have to wait around for glue to dry, and I don't have the patience for it. Okay, so then I've got my acetate in there. I've got my pieces that I go to add, and I panicked for a minute. They were just on the wrong sides. We're okay. Everybody's okay. Nobody died. I'm lining them up so that they look straight. And again, I am second guessing myself and my ability to eyeball this. So I put mint tape on either side so that once the glue is on there, I know where it goes, and I'm not going to accidentally smear glue somewhere where I don't want it, because at this point, I am not starting over. I'm double checking and making sure that bottom piece is lined up, especially the sort of black lines or the black pieces that go vertically. And I'll do the same thing on the bottom. The wet glue really helps me wiggle it because it's butting right up against that edge and that acetate. Then we're going to add our sentiment directly onto the acetate. So I'm holding up just some like scrap die cuts to get my placement right. And then I'm putting a little bit of mint tape right above the happy where I want it to go. I have cut this out with some double-sided adhesive. They call them white liner sheets. I have no idea why. They are clear. The adhesive is clear. So I put some black cardstock on there, ran it through my machine, and I'm very carefully pulling that out of its backing, and now I have a sticker. It doesn't look like much through the acetate from the back, where like glue can get kind of messy and it can smear on acetate. I'm lining up the edge of the happy right on the edge of the card, and then I'll line it up straight underneath that mint tape. I left myself right so I knew where to put it. For this birthday, I was having a hard time getting the placement, so I ran the die and the shadow through at the same time to get this template. So I can line it up where I want it. I use some mint tape to hold it in place, and then I can set my birthday sticker right into the template. Some of that mint tape got really close to the cutout pieces, so I will pull that away as I'm setting things down. I had to very carefully remove that white paper around it, the shadow around it. I touched the birthday a little bit too much, so it's not as sticky as the happy was. It's going to be just fine, but I'm always hesitant to press on it too much before I get that backer off in case they're overlapping. Then I'm going to add some decoration to the top and bottom panels. This is from the Envelope of Wonder. Again, I have 2 tubs at this point of florals just hanging out on my desk, and I'm trying to use them up. These are some of my favorites because they're sort of wonky and asymmetrical, and there's lots of ways you can put them together, and they look beautiful. So I'm really at this point working on the top section. And once I get everything where I want it, I'll bring out my sticky mat. If you've been here for any amount of time, you know that this is my go-to. Then I'm going to start by gluing these die cuts to each other, right? There's enough that isn't touching the sticky mat that I want to make sure it's not going to fall off the mat when I go to flip it over. And then I will lay that right back down in the bottom left-hand corner, and it's exactly where I want it. I always make sure I start with it in the bottom left-hand corner. I didn't want to have to arrange them again on the bottom. I couldn't do it. So I am just laying the exact same size flowers and leaves over top of the top arrangement, and I'll pick them up with my sticky mat. I was so proud of myself in this moment. I was like, you're going to do it. You can see the finish line. And then I will flip it over and figure out where it needs to be. It's a little bit tricky because it isn't exactly symmetrical. And so I am going to have to figure out placement on the other side and give myself a way to know where to set the sticky mat down. So once again, I am gluing the die cut pieces together, and I'm even going to bring in a tiny little piece of tape. I use Micropore tape. It's like medical tape, but it's paper. So it takes glue really well as opposed to like a Scotch tape. Then I'm just getting my placement, right? I'm trying to figure out where I want it. And then I'm going to add a little bit of mint tape right along that diagonal cut. So I know when I set it down that I'm lining up the mint tape, and then the left side, okay? I knew when I pulled this up that those were the two pieces I was trying to line up. But if it didn't line up straight on the side, I would have put the mint tape on the diagonal and then a piece of mint tape where the side is, and that would have been just fine. And 3 hours after I started this card, it is done, and I am so, so pleased with it. I think it's beautiful. I hope you enjoy it too. I would love to know which of these two cards is your favorite, and if you have tried the April sheet load yet, again, I'll link to that video below with all of its instructions. It's a great sheet load this month. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I will see you next time.